All right, well, Manso and Clay Ferraro, Miami Sports Pod, and what Clay has turned out to be a disappointing stretch for the Dolphins. It's 3 straight losses now with their loss against the Vikings on Sunday, and we're going to talk plenty of Tua and the impact, obviously, of not having him, but it was a lot more than just Tua on Sunday and not having your quarterback. Obviously, that's the focus of it. That's the center point. When a team loses their quarterback and they were playing so well with Tua, it makes a huge difference. But there's a lot of other things that are concerning right now. So what's concerning you most about this 3-game losing streak, and in particular what you saw on Sunday?
The offensive line. That's the big one. I understand both tackles were out, and, it's a different cadence playing with a different quarterback, 2 quarterbacks per week. I don't want to hear it. And I don't think Dolphins fans want to hear it. It didn't look good. And I think there's been improvement in the running game. I think if you watch this team, and especially the perimeter running game, I like what I see once they get outside. That's the hallmark of a Kyle Shanahan / Mike McDaniel offense, is that perimeter running game. But if your quarterback is running for his life, or you're committing penalties over and over again, it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter how good you can run the ball on the outside. The one thing Mike McDaniel said that I guess I understand a little bit is that when you go on a 2-game losing streak, now a 3-game losing streak, and when you're on your 3rd quarterback, then back to your 2nd quarterback, his feeling was that maybe guys are pressing a little bit and trying to do too much. You can understand that, and yet it falls on the head coach now, and he admitted that, but the honeymoon is over. Mike McDaniel has to figure out why this team's attention to detail has fallen flat. And ultimately, that is coaching, and fixing it is coaching. And now we see what he's got.
Yeah, and you look at the stretch in particular of that game. You look at the stretch where it was penalty, drive killer, big play by Skylar Thompson before he got hurt, penalty, another big play, penalty. I mean, at some point, it is a reflection of your head coach. And that's not to say that, this isn't to throw the blame on Mike McDaniel, but I think to your point, there's a lot of ugliness going on right now with this team. And it's not just about Tua and the struggles. There is a fundamental issue right now with the way this team is playing. And maybe it is partly because they're pressing. Maybe it's partly because they know they're missing their quarterback. And look, this week they had Skylar go out and practice all week. And is Teddy going to be ready? And then there was the questions of, well, if Teddy's ready, why isn't Teddy starting if he's your backup? There's a lot of stuff that's still lingering around this team. But the bottom line is that offensive line play, awful. Injuries again, but look around the league. What team doesn't have injuries, Clay? I mean, we watch games. You and I are texting all Sunday. I know fans are watching games. Every team has injuries. Every team has issues. Dolphins more so because it's your starting quarterback. But I'm just talking about in other positions. You have to have a next man have mentality. You got a game plan around that. So when you look at the challenge Mike McDaniel has now is, number one is, get Tua back, make sure he's clear. And he has cleared protocols. Get him a week of work, and hopefully he returns next week. But when you look at the way this team has played the last 3 weeks, just nothing seems in unison right now. And I think if you're going to sit there when they're 3-0 and say, hey, great job by Mike McDaniel, and he's changed the culture and the attitude and the offense of this team, you also at the same time, when they don't play to that level, you have to say, Mike McDaniel has to do a better job. Players have to do a better job. The way they prepare has to be better, because right now this team just did not look good. They came out flat. They made mistakes. They sort of recovered, and then they had the late fumble and the turnovers and the penalties. This, as much as the Dolphins could have won on Sunday, was just another reflection of how poorly they're playing, because they kept getting in their own way every time they got close to making some noise.
Prime Dan Marino wouldn't have led a team to a victory the way they played out. So, you know what I mean? I mean, it's one of those things where, the quarterback gets too much of the credit and too much of the blame. It didn't matter. And to add to that, Skylar Thompson played well before he got hurt. I thought Teddy Bridgewater made some nice plays when he was out there. Now, not quite healthy Tua nice. I mean, we've seen what healthy Tua Tagovailoa can do in this offense when he's got protection. And yet, when everybody else, and I don't care if it's that you're trying to press. Cool, you're trying hard. Love it. That's what you're supposed to do.
And that's what teams do. Yeah, that's what players do.
Details matter. Details matter so much, Will. And in a league where I think there are 3 good football teams, 3 really good football teams around the NFL. And look, Giants are what, 5-1? 6-5-1? I mean, I think you would admit, and I'm going to put Minnesota and the Giants in the same category.
Minnesota's 5-1. Did that team? Did you watch Minnesota on Sunday and say to yourself, "That's an elite team"?
No. And so I don't.
The league is the parity of the league, and the difference between good and bad is so minimal right now.
And what's the difference, Will? It's the details.
Yeah,
and
details,
when you
turnovers,
fail
mistakes,
the details, it's what happens. And look, I'm a Saints fan. That's a team that fails in the details this year. They're 2-4. They could easily be 5-1. But you fail in the details, and you're going to fail the final. This is the best way to put it, Will. If you do, like, let's say you're in school, right? And you go through the entire school year and all your quizzes, you get A's and B's. But your final exam, the biggest thing of the whole semester, and the details matter, and you fail that one, and it counts for 90% of your grade. What's your final grade? Well, you get an F. And I'm sorry, but
I go through it with my kids. They got 2 in high school right now, so that conversation unfortunately happens.
But it's true, and I mean, I think relative to an NFL team, and I'm not trying to like make a crazy analogy out of this thing, but when you have really 3 really good football teams in the NFL, I think it's the Bills, I think it's the Chiefs, and I think it's the Philadelphia Eagles.
Throw the Cowboys in there. They're probably 3 or 4, but I'm with you. Yeah, very few.
I have no problem with that, but I think then you've got 28 or 29 other teams that can beat any other team on any day, maybe the Carolina Panthers. But if you don't do the little things right, you're going to be the team that loses the game. You're not going. That Minnesota Vikings team, Will, is not a good football team. They're a team that I think is well coached and does things the right way to where they've won these games where the details matter. They did it against the Saints. They did it against the Dolphins on Sunday. And yet in that game against the Dolphins are driving for the go-ahead touchdown until Jalen Waddle fumbles. Yeah. And that's again, it's not putting the game on Jalen Waddle because there are a bunch of other guys who screwed up.
Yeah, there were a lot of mistakes. I think that's the problem. I mentioned the penalties in that drive where it's just penalty after penalty after penalty. We obviously had the turnovers that you saw, the Bridgewater interception earlier, which the ball got batted around again. The pass to Jalen Waddle, it got batted around, it got picked off. The late turnover by Waddle. I mean, there were mistakes in this game. By the way, Jason Sanders all of a sudden forgot how to kick. All of a sudden, Mr. Automatic isn't so automatic. And every time those 3 points make a difference in these games, the way you're approaching it down the stretch. But I will say this, when you ask yourself, okay, how do you fix it? How do you fix it? And are you panicking? I'm not panicking because Tua Tagovailoa has not returned yet. They were 3-0 in position where Tua was clicking. And by the way, Tyreek Hill, even at a loss, was still spectacular. I mean, he makes 10 catch, 150-yard games look like it's nothing. And it's something. I mean, it's not that, especially when you got Skylar Thompson and Teddy Bridgewater figuring out who your quarterback is, an offensive line that gives them no time. Tyreek Hill has been everything advertised and even more. So I think when you look at that, you say to yourself, okay, that is where I can hang my hat and say things will be okay. We can figure this out. If we get Tua back, there's still the weapons. Waddle, despite his mistakes on Sundays, had another big game statistically, is having a big season. I like what the Dolphins have at running back. I still think that there are playmakers there. I think as much as I talked about Mike McDaniel earlier, I'm not down on Mike McDaniel. I just think this is a part of coaching, is dealing with adversity, and how your team deals with it is getting his team straightened out. Is it as simple, you think, Clay, as Tua comes back and this team is fixed? Or is there, even if Tua comes back next week, that things are not fixed? And by the way, as I lead into that, the schedule does lighten up. The Dolphins have a very easy, at least on paper, schedule for the next 5-6 weeks.
I don't care who plays quarterback. If the rest of the team plays like they did on Sunday against the Vikings, they're going to lose games. And I don't care who plays quarterback. If the rest of the guys around the quarterback play a lot better than they did on Sunday, they got a chance to win games. And that's with Thompson. That's with Teddy Bridgewater. That's with Tua Tagovailoa. I don't know, Will. Maybe Reed Sinnett could even go out there and win games. He could start. The point with this team is the defense played pretty well, I thought, on Sunday. Now, the yards, I think, were a little bit inflated and deflated when you look at both sides. The Dolphins had almost twice as many yards as the Vikings did, but that was because field position was a real issue for a lot of this game. Now, the flip side of that is defense made the plays when they needed to, up until the point when they were on the field too much and Dalvin Cook broke that big one. But it's like bad teams, when one thing gets fixed, there's another leak. And so the Dolphins are going to have to prove really quickly. They're going to have to decide if they're going to be a good team or a bad team. Because If they fix these penalty issues that we saw on Sunday, and they don't turn over the ball, and everything else on offense starts to look better, maybe the offensive line plays better, but then all of a sudden the defense falls apart, you're a bad team because you plug one hole and another one starts to leak. The good teams are the ones that when they figure out something and fix it, it stays fixed, relatively speaking, and then they can fix something else, and then hopefully by the end of the season, everything is right. And I'll say this, Will, I want to kind of go back to what you said, because I want to make this 100% clear. This is not saying that Mike McDaniel is doing a poor job. Every coach is going to go through this. Every coach is going to ride these ups and downs, and it's ultimately at the end of the year, the good coaches are the ones who fix the stuff that goes wrong and gets their team to play their best football at the end of the year. That's when we're going to find out who Mike McDaniel is as a head coach. Yeah. Because if he's able to fix this stuff, then it's going to be, hey, man, this guy's got something, because he's been able to tune in on the details, tune up the details, and fix the stuff that was going wrong.
To your point, though, a good team isn't just one that plays well when everything's going their way.
Right.
You can't in the league, as we talked about with all the teams there's a lot of parity. There's a lot of teams that deal with injuries. There's a lot of downs. And look, Patrick Mahomes threw an awful pick on Sunday in that game against KC. No one's going to tell you Patrick Mahomes isn't a great quarterback. He's one of the best ever. When it all said and done, he's going to be one of the best ever. But I think you have to be able to deal with those adversities, and right now the Dolphins, what they haven't done, and it's just a 6-week sample size, is that they haven't dealt with adversity well. Again, I preface that with, you don't have your starting quarterback. That I can't just deflect that away and say that's not a big deal. Of course it's a big deal. But if everything has to be perfect for you to have success, you're probably not going to have a lot of success, because everything is not going to be perfect. And even when Tua comes back, things won't be perfect.
Yeah, and before people jump and say, oh, well, they were trailing big in Baltimore. No, I mean, you give them credit for that, but it's like when the snowball starts rolling, and can you find a way to get out of it? And that was a game where they got the snowball going the right way. And look, this is not taking away what they did in that game. It's saying that when you have a lot of things start to go wrong, can you find what your identity is and stick to it? And it's just hard with what I've seen with this team so far, where you're finding. I don't want to see a team that finds a way to lose games. I want you to find a way to win games.
And Clay, here's another thing. You and I talked about it before that we taped the pod, and I think Dolphin fans are thinking it. I think the same old Dolphins theory is silly. These are not the same old Dolphins. This is a different team. But there's something about this team over the course of the last decade or so, decade plus, where what's the whole word of complementary football, right? Where, you have to be able to defense to be able to pick up the offense and vice versa. There is a sense over these last 3 weeks that there hasn't been enough that's gone from other units picking up another unit, another, special teams picking up this, whatever it may be. I mentioned the Jason Sanders miss and the fumbles and the penalties. There's just been a lot of this going on, where in a situation like this was the kind of game where you needed that big defensive play, right? The pick that changed the game. You needed Jalen Waddle to break free and make a big play instead of fumbling. You needed Teddy Bridgewater to come in and step in and make plays right away. There is just something missing about this team right now in this stretch that doesn't feel right. And it gives you a little kind of anxiety, I think, as a Dolphin fan, where you start to dig back to the past and say, man, are we a similar team as far as like we just can't get out of our own way and another unit can't help another unit? And Clay, I go back to Tua. Tua is expected to return this week. It's not official, but we should get clarity from Mike McDaniel. He's clear protocol. He should play. We expect him at practice on Wednesday. This is the classic case, Clay, of, man, you don't know what you have until it's gone. We spent months in the offseason wondering if Tua's the guy. We spent weeks through the preseason and even through the 3-0 start saying if this is proof that Tua has arrived and he's legit. And now in 3 weeks we've seen, guess what? He's a damn good quarterback, and he is the key to this team. And with him gone, this team has little to no chance to get to anywhere close to where they want to get. That means the playoffs. That means a winning record. That means any kind of success. So I think, if anything, not that you want injuries in such an awful situation like this to bring clarity to your quarterback question. It's pretty clear that Tua Tagovailoa is the guy who drives this team. And without Tua, this team isn't going anywhere.
If he can stay healthy, Will, and you made the comment on Sunday, you tweeted this, and you're right. I don't know if I want to anywhere near this offensive line. Part of that's on Tua too. I mean, part of it is you need to make sure that you are protecting yourself. And I think the thing that's been a little concerning with Tua, and this goes back to Alabama, is even when he was at Alabama and he had the best offensive line in college football, he still found a way to get hurt. And I think part of it is it's almost like I think he's too tough for his own good sometimes. I think he wants so badly to make a play, and you want to credit him for that toughness, and you do. And yet we're here in, been in the league now for a while, and he's not a rookie anymore, and he still doesn't seem to have that sense of knowing when to say when. And unfortunately, when the offensive line is playing like this,
I was going to say with that line, my goodness.
So, and again, I'll agree with this point for sure. This team is not going to make a playoff run with Skylar Thompson or Teddy Bridgewater. This team's not going to go to the Super Bowl with those guys. They need Tua healthy in order to do that. They can win games, though, with those guys. But they need that man, Mike McDaniel, to raise the level of play of the guys around them and figure out how to come out with the same sort of energy and passion. Because one thing that he said in the postgame was that he loved their preparation this week. He loved the energy. He felt like they were ready to play. And then they go out there and the details slip. So you need to find a way to harness that energy. Make sure that these guys in the offensive line, the receivers, go out there and they play with the same level of passion and intensity, but they dial back on the mistakes. And if you do that, you can win games with any one of these three quarterbacks. But yes, the only way this team makes any sort of a run that, we're at the top block of the newscast every day in January and getting excited is if Tua Tagovailoa is healthy and he's this team's starting quarterback and he's playing like he did the first few weeks.
Yeah, I will say this. So this is one area I think we probably disagree, which is rare because you and I usually are in agreement on things like this. I think this is a mediocre to bad team without Tua. I don't think this is, despite the fact that they have, look, Tyreek Hill goes out and has this incredible game, and Jalen Waddle made a couple mistakes, but he put up some numbers, and the defense was really playing well for a good portion of this game, and yet they still went out there and couldn't get this done. And it goes back to my theory of complementary football with this team. Until they show me otherwise, I don't feel comfortable saying that this team can be a good football team without Tua. Now, let's put it this way. I hope this conversation is moot, because if Tua comes back next week, I hope he plays the remainder of the season. Clay, what did you say before the season was the key to your season? Remember what you said? You said, I remember it well, my biggest thing, this is what you said in this season is, I just want to see Tua get through the whole season and see what he's got and see if he's the guy.
Yep.
Through 3 weeks, we saw he could be the guy. But as you said, you can't be the guy for just 3 weeks. You have to be the guy over the course of the season. He's missed the last couple of weeks, 2.5 games, whatever it may be, since that ugly scene in Cincinnati. Get healthy, be healthy, protect yourself from yourself, use those weapons. This all O-line is a concern. Teron Armstead's got to get back and stay healthy. That's very important for this team. But we need to see Tua these final 11 games just be out there and be the guy that we saw those first 3 weeks. If he does that, even with an O-line that at times can struggle, even with a defense that at times is prone to give up some big plays, I think this is a playoff team still. I really do. The last 3 weeks haven't changed my take on that.
No, and let me add one level of hope, because I didn't mean to say Tua is never going to find a way to protect himself. I think Mike Daniel has reached Tua in a way that no other coach has been able to. And
he believes in him, for one. He believes in him.
And I don't think I'm out of school in saying that, because Tua stood up there and said, nobody's ever coached me like him before. Kind of not being your buddy, but not running you down either. It just, when he was talking about how Nick Saban and his father coached him, and obviously Brian Flores, there was some friction there. So maybe now Mike McDaniel can finally be the coach that reaches Tua and says, throw the ball away. I don't care if you get an intentional grounding. I don't care, because we are not going to go to where we need to go.
We need you.
So that's, the two things right now that I need Mike McDaniel to do. Number one, I need him to fix the details and get this team to stop making silly mistakes, which is on the head coach. And number two, I need him to get with Tua, need him to reach him and be the first coach that can finally express to Tua and get him to act on this, you have to protect yourself. And this offensive line is not going to be perfect. It might not even be good in pass protection. You're going to need to be able to throw the football away and live to play another down.
And by the way, to finish the point on Tua and to finish the point of the Dolphins is that Tua's strength is his quick decision and accuracy and, throwing, quick read. I think what McDaniel, and he probably has said it, and I think what Tua needs to understand is that it's okay to live to see another day if that first or second read isn't there. Don't try to extend plays too much. Don't try to get too wild because, again, with that offensive line, with the struggles they've had, with the history given with him with injuries even before this concussion a few weeks ago, you just have to just make your read, make your second read. If it's not there, move on, because the Dolphins, the anticipation on Tua on his throws is excellent. The accuracy is excellent. You put your hands into your playmakers, you give the ball, you get out there, you get it to Hill, you get it to Waddle, you let them do their thing. Otherwise, you move forward because we've seen that if we learned anything the last 3 weeks, this team is going to live and die with Tua Tagovailoa if they're going to get to where they want to be. To your point on Mike McDaniel, clean up the little details and the messes that are going on right now with penalties and mistakes, because even with Tua back, if that continues, this team is going to struggle. The bright spot of it all is Tua's expected back, and they do have a much lighter schedule ahead that hopefully for Dolphin fans they can take advantage. All right, so as we look ahead to the schedule for us, how about this? The Heat open up on Wednesday night. Want to get a quick conversation on the Heat, Clay, because we're going to talk plenty of Heat during the season, and it's a long year. But what did you learn in training camp? The whole run it back theory and what we expected. There wasn't much to learn as far from a personnel standpoint, but the way you use that personnel, and Eric Spoelstra will use that personnel. Tyler Hero, 6th man of the year, huge contract. All of a sudden, he's likely going to be a starter. I think that was known and is clear. And then Caleb Martin looks like he's going to be the guy that's going to get the first crack at PJ Tucker's spot in the 4. What'd you learn, and what do you think heading into Heat season?
I'll say the first thing I guess that surprised me is the young guys. Jamal Cain, man, I was super impressed by him, and where he really got my attention, I'm sure he did everybody, was when he was guarding Kevin Durant. And, they had that moment where, you see him whisper to Durant, like, man, you're my idol. Like, I grew up, and KD says, look, you belong, you belong. And then he went out there and he guarded him really well.
Pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
I know it was just preseason, but for Jamal Cain, that wasn't just the preseason. That was playing against your idol. That was bigger than that. And he treated it like, just level-headed, calm, cool. After the game, you could tell he was geeking out, and he has every right to. So I was impressed by him. Guys like Drew Smith. I mean, some of these young guys, and man, Nikola Jovic. I was impressed by Jovic. I love that Spo threw him out with the starters in that final preseason game. Threw him out there in the second quarter with the four of the starters. I'll say this. I like him and Bam playing together a lot more than I like Bam and Yurt playing together. I think the Bam and Yurt experiment is not going to happen much. So, I can't say at all, but not much. I don't think so. I guess what I learned is I think those guys can contribute. And I think over the course of a long season, when you're going to need to steal rest for your older vets, I'm okay. I think those guys are going to be all right. Look, I loved how connected they looked. They looked like a team. They know each other. Yeah, they know each other. Yeah. And that's great. Look, I still look at what Philadelphia did. I look at what Boston did, and now adding Malcolm Brogdon and what Milwaukee did, and it still concerns me that everybody else got better personnel wise, and the Heat didn't. We'll see. We'll see if that running it back and the connectivity and everybody stays healthy and Kyle Lowry getting in better shape. We'll see if the internal improvement of the Heat is better than the personnel improvement and internal improvement of every other contender. But, right now, look, you like what you see so far, and hopefully it lasts. I'm glad you mentioned the internal improvement, because that's how the Heat feel that they did get better and will get better, is the whole run it back. And this is, I remember talking to Eric Spoelstra of the Bahamas a few weeks back at the start of training camp, and he's like, I understand the term run it back, but I don't like to say it because I don't think it's running it back when you expect to have improvement, when you expect to have internal improvement. And if that was, 3-4 weeks ago, and now I understand it, because having seen this team the last couple of weeks, Tyler Hero looks like a different player.
He looks like he's taken a next step. Bam Adebayo looks like a different player. It looks like even after all the evolution of Bam, a defensive player of the year type player, the aggression is there. I love that he had, 25 points in 25 minutes the other day, and he took 12 shots, and he's putting the ball up. I think he could put 15, 18 shots a game most nights. And I think the thing that impressed me most, Clay, about the preseason was we know what the Heat have in their starters. We know that Jimmy, the show runs through him. I just mentioned the internal improvements with Tyler and Bam. Kyle looks to be in better shape. You would expect that he is going to play well if healthy. I love the bench. I look at this team and I look at the depth. And when you have a Max Strus who also looks like he's taking the next step, and a Gabe Vincent and Duncan trying to redeem himself, and Victor Oladipo now a couple of years removed from injury and looking to be even better. And we know what Depot can be defensively, but I mean from an offensive standpoint, when you look at what they have potentially, their second unit can be really strong. And when I look at their starters as a very good unit, and then I look at what that second unit can be, and then I attach that to what you just referenced about younger guys that at some point, look, Jimmy said it this week, there are going to be injuries. There's going to be setbacks. There's going to be things that happen in the course of an 82-game season, but that they've got those young guys to potentially turn to. And then you've got the mad scientist in it all, and Eric Spoelstra, who loves to mix and match and kind of work his way through these lineups. I am so much more confident now in what the Heat could be than I was 2 or 3 weeks ago, because now I understand what the run it back theory is all about. This team feels like this isn't the same team of last year. They don't want to be the same team of last year. They fell short of their goal of reaching the finals. This is a team that truly feels they could be one of the better teams. And Clay, when I look at it, I want to end this podcast by talking about our predictions. I think the Heat, I don't think I could say they're the best team in the East. I don't think I can say they're the second best team in the East, but I think they could be a top 4 team in the East. I think this could be a team that could be in that 3 or 4 spot. And remember, we said that last year, that with the hope that they could be 3 or 4, and they ended up number 1 in the East in the regular season. So I think people that are throwing this off as a potential play-in team or a 6-7 team seed, I just don't see it. This is a deep and talented basketball team that I think is going to keep getting better.
Yeah, and look, I'm not – I just feel like – I think there are a lot of teams that are sitting there saying internal improvement. And I think with the Heat, it's solely internal improvement and adding the young guys. Whereas with Boston, it's internal improvement and we added Brock.
But how often is the internal improvement you're proving guys already? Like Tyler and Bam are proven, and that's internal.
Yeah, that's fair. And look, if Tyler Hero takes a leap, and look, I mean, with Tyler, if we're talking about taking a leap, you're talking about 25 points a game. I mean,
I think he could be that. I think he could be 23 to 25. Yeah.
That's a different story. Okay, that's a different type of internal improvement because that's a player going from 6th man of the year to all-star. And like all-star in place of Donovan Mitchell in the East type of all-star. Like that's not just a little internal.
Listen, Tyler thought he should have been an all-star last year, and maybe he probably could have been.
So look, if he gets there, then that's a different situation. I'll say, this is not me backtracking. If they get to that place where they're 4th or 5th in the East, all that matters is the playoffs. It really doesn't if they just get there, get one of those seeds where you like the matchups that you get, and you're not having to go through Boston, Brooklyn, and Milwaukee, or whatever your toughest matchups are. Like, get to that place, and then anything can happen. And in reality, Will, I think a lot of people, as fun as last year was, they were the number 1 team in the East, and I think it still left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths because of how it ended. So just get there, be healthy, be the hot team, and if you're in that top 4, top 5 spot, you got a shot, and that's all that matters.
Starts Wednesday night over at FTX. Chicago Bulls in town. Long season ahead. As for the Dolphins, again, a lot of work to be done for this team, but I'm not going to lose hope on the Dolphins. I still think this is a team that can turn things around. We'll get more clarity as the week goes on Tua, but the expectation is he will return to action. So that is your Miami Sports Pod. Always appreciate you listening, subscribing, checking it out at local10.com and on social media as well. We will chat next week.